The safety of the dust, where the self ceases to actively engage with its own boundaries. Man, that is a chilling thought, isn't it? Just imagine a mind, or maybe even an entire society, slowly collapsing in on itself. Not with a sudden explosion, but with this quiet, suffocating retreat straight into the shadows. Welcome to our latest explainer. Today we're exploring a deeply unsettling, yet absolutely fascinating psychodynamic framework. We're going to navigate the psyche's struggle not just as dry clinical data, but as a grim, dark, cautionary fable.
Okay, let's dive right into this dark allegory. What we're looking at today is a forensic explainer of how a psyche, or a social order for that matter, collapses from traditional structured legalism into a terrifying state known as active nihilism. We're going to map out this internal disintegration using a very specific professional psychological framework, but we'll be viewing it entirely through the lens of a Gothic tragedy. It's a story of internal forces warring for control, where the real tragedy lies in a profound failure to grow.
So instead of a traditional clinical overview, I want you to think of this tripartite structure of the mind as a decaying Gothic kingdom, a kingdom ruled by what our sources call the three fractured lords. Now, these lords aren't external enemies. They map directly onto our own internal disintegration. They represent the fractured pieces of a self that is literally at war with its own potential, pulling us down into a state where authentic life is traded away from mere existence.
This beautifully grounds our mythic tragedy by mapping these Gothic figures directly to a professional psychodynamic framework. On the top row, we've got the High Judge, which represents the superego, our institutional authority. Right below him is Von Nix, a dark personification of the id, totally driven by primal resentment. And finally, the Jester, representing the maladaptive ego, functioning as a chaotic nihilistic deconstructor.
Section 1. The Museum of the Soul.
Let's examine our first fractured lord, the High Judge, who occupies a stagnant throne of established order. The crucial point here is that this stagnant superego has fundamentally failed in its purpose. Rather than engaging in the continuous, vibrant activity of striving and self-overcoming, it actually mistakes sterile safety for moral virtue. It uses rigid legalism not to dispense true justice, but as a kind of psychological bandage to insulate itself from what the sources call the shock of becoming. It creates this spiritually dead state, a static museum of the soul. The High Judge's authority is clinically defensive, desperately guarding a fragile illusion of value just to protect itself from the friction of growth. Because, it is far easier to police the boundaries of a tomb than to cultivate a garden.
Section 2. Monster in the Walls. But beneath the conscious floorboards of the psyche, something else is stirring. The repressed not I, Von Nix, the tarantula. Notice how the id weaponizes primal resentment here. In a healthy psyche, the not I provides the necessary friction for growth, right? But here, the stagnant superego has completely repressed it. Left to rot in the dark, the id becomes a parasitic monster. Driven by a subterranean hunger for revenge, Von Nix spins the web of equality. It's a truly dark philological twist where envy is basically rebranded as societal virtue. The goal? To bind anyone who strives for greatness in chains of gray silk, dragging everything down just to ensure all lives remain flat, equal, and as sterile as a tomb.
Section 3. Deconstructor versus the Architect. To prevent the kingdom from falling to the monster in the walls, the psyche requires mediation. And herein lies the tragic irony of our tale. The ego basically has two paths it can take. On the left, we have the Jester, the maladaptive, broken ego. He is driven by this intense theoretical allergy to all forms of authority, acting as a nihilistic deconstructor who actually feeds the id's resentment. But on the right, we have the clinical alternative, Das Wanderer, the adaptive ego and creative architect. Das Wanderer sublimates that venomous envy into continuous, creative self-transformation. So where the Jester triggers total ego dissolution, Das Wanderer actually builds a stronger self.
Das Wanderer embodies what philosophers call the Fichtean I, the true self-actualizing self. This adaptive ego looks straight into the psychical void and, instead of falling into it, fills it through the fire of self-transformation. He chooses the steep, difficult mountain path of struggle and growth, recognizing that authentic struggle is literally the only form of true justice. It's a beautifully stark vision of psychological health.
But in our grim-dark fable, Das Wanderer is cast aside. The Jester takes the stage. Failing entirely in his role as mediator, the Jester wields a terrifying tool, the Void Mirror.
He intentionally uses this mirror to strip away the High Judge's legalistic facades. And what does the mirror reveal? Well, it exposes that the High Judge's sterile legalism was never about justice at all. Underneath the robes of authority is a purposeless, burning desire to punish, a desire completely identical to the id's subterranean resentment. The gesture just shatters the psyche's defenses entirely.
Section 4. The monstrous synthesis.
So, the jester's exposure leads to a catastrophic failure of mediation. It's a terminal state where the dialectic of the self absolutely curdles. Let's break down this clinical failure step by step, just to see how two polarized extremes catastrophically merge into one nightmare. Step 1. The stagnant superego fundamentally fails to strive, hiding behind its psychological bandages. Step 2. The maladaptive jester exposes the psychical void, completely destroying the illusion of value. And Step 3. With the boundaries shattered, the id's repressed primal resentment permanently merges with the institutional authority of the superego. The very force meant to protect the kingdom fuses with the monster meant to destroy it.
Section 5. Anatomy of a clinical failure. From this monstrous synthesis, a terrifying hybrid is born from the shadows of the mind, the Red Judge. This terminal state really defines the core of the nightmare. The Red Judge is the ultimate embodiment of active nihilism. In this terminal state, the healthy dialectic is just frozen. The Red Judge discards the gavel, which remember is a tool of careful, balanced mediation, and replaces it with a branding iron of pure retribution. This new ruler doesn't want justice or growth. It only wants to mark the world and the self with permanent, silent scars.
Look at the symptoms of this terminal regression. The psyche permanently abandons the mountain path of growth. Instead of building an architecture of self-actualization, it erects a monument to destruction. The Red Judge becomes this horrifying mask for decay. And the supreme tragedy of this Gothic fable is that this active nihilism cannot be contained. The resentment eventually consumes everything. It devours both the judge and the judged, leaving nothing but a flat, sterile tomb. Ultimately, this terminal regression ensures the spirit remains trapped forever in the suffocating safety of the dust.
This psychodynamic map serves as a profound warning about the dangers of avoiding the friction of personal growth. The monstrous synthesis of the Red Judge is the inevitable outcome for any mind that chooses sterile safety over the courage of self-overcoming. As we close this dark explainer, I really want you to look inward. Examine your own internal kingdom. Ask yourself, are you acting as the creative architect walking the steep mountain path of growth? Or are you, perhaps unknowingly, building a monument to destruction in the suffocating safety of the dust?